Good morning, everyone. I'm Michael Theodore, the General Manager of the IAB Education Foundation, the iDiverse initiative. It's a great crowd this morning. Last time we were here, it was a much smaller crowd. I'm so excited that we have such interest in our diversity and inclusion initiatives. Want to get the morning started with Tim Armstrong, Chairman of the Board of Directors of the Education Foundation, and Randall Rothenberg, President and CEO of the IAB. Tim?
I think you go first because I have a feeling the notes are in your...
All right. Do you need notes?
No.
Oh, you go first.
I'm going to go first. Actually, I have notes.
Oh, yeah.
I want to thank everybody for coming here. I want to thank everybody for coming here. This is a really wonderful event, and as Michael said, it's a wonderful advance over our first meeting, which itself was a wonderful advance. We've accomplished a great deal during the first formal year of the IAB Education Foundation and the iDiverse initiative. And I wanted to give you some of the headlines and some of the news, and then I want to turn this over to Tim, who has been a remarkable chairman and a great leader with also a terrific team. And we'll talk more about that as well. So if you'll allow me to call this up. We promised that we were going to create a new kind of a training program that would prepare diverse audiences, underrepresented constituencies for new and well-paying entry-level jobs in the digital advertising and media industry. And really wanted to let you know that we now at iDiverse are coming through on these commitments in a big way. Later today at the College of San Mateo in Silicon Valley, 38 women and men will begin a 4-month intensive training program. We recruited the students by working with a number of nonprofits in the Bay Area. The foundation is paying their tuition costs. This is the beginning of the formal training initiatives in ad operations, digital marketing, sales support, and data analytics. You remember those of you who were here a year ago will recall that one of the founding principles of the foundation and the iDiverse initiative is doing actual training and certification for real jobs in digital media marketing and advertising. And the College of San Mateo program, which begins today, is the first formal program that is training young people for these positions. We also today are very proud to announce our first East Coast academic partner, the Borough of Manhattan Community College. The foundation and BMCC will collaborate on a similar training program, similar to the College of San Mateo's, and it's based on employers' real needs. The program is going to start later this year, and special thanks to Sunil Gupta, the Dean of BMCC's, Dean of the Center of Adult Continuing Education and Workforce Development, for his commitment to our program. Sunil, I know you're here. So in any event, these two programs, one on the West Coast, one on the East Coast, are really bookends for something that we expect will grow much larger and fairly quickly, because by being able to codify and standardize the training and bring it into community college settings, we have real audience, real students, and the next step is to connect them to real jobs. We are preparing online versions of the training programs as well, so the scalability will be, we think, profound and rapid, and the results will be wonderful for the goals of the iDiverse initiative. So with that, I'd really like to turn it over to Tim, who is a lot of the inspiration for what we're doing. Tim and Tim's team, Twyla and Maureen, working with Michael and Krista and Megan on our team, have done a just a tremendous job, not just of inspiring, but of really crafting a very, very important program. So, Tim?
Thanks, Randy. So first, thank you all for coming this morning, and this is the second or third event we've done, and it's really great. How many people here are Olympic fans, have been watching something to do with the Olympics? Okay. You're excited by it, correct? Okay. This is the Olympics of diversity, is what we're doing right now. Randy and I are both technically on vacation this week, and I had to explain to my 3 children why I was leaving vacation to come back to Manhattan, and they said, "Dad, why are you leaving us?" I said, "Do you guys like the Olympics?" They said, "Yes, Dad. We love the Olympics." I said, "Well, what if we said that only certain people could compete in the Olympics and only certain people, depending on their backgrounds, were allowed to get in the starting blocks?" And we were watching some of the sprinting events when we were having this conversation. And really, I think what today is really about, which is super, super important, I think both to Randy and I, is a lot of companies, and from an industry perspective, have been announcing all of their diversity numbers, and there's a lot of feedback around those diversity numbers. But I think when we got together on this with Michael and our team, the one thing we want to do is actually make physical change and infrastructure change. And just like the Olympics has Olympic development training programs and allows athletes from all over the world to compete, our industry, that's exactly the same infrastructure we want inside of our own industry, and we decided that when we started this program that we would actually try to launch physical product and physical change. And I think today actually is a huge, huge day and an exciting day for all of us, because we have the education programs launching, and we also have the first physical diversity product for the industry that was built for the industry. And I would just call out 2 people on our team, Twyla and Maureen, who are right here, right down. Stand up for a minute. Stand up. These are our Olympic gold medalists. And I was also explaining to my kids, which was, they were asking, I was explaining what the product was that we were going to announce today. And I said, do you know those commercials like the P&G commercial and the UPS commercials where they have the people who live their normal lives and they work and then they compete in the Olympics? That Maureen and Twyla both have more than full-time jobs overall, and spent their time for the last 52 weeks have been meeting and building with Michael Theodore. Where's Michael? Over here probably. For the last 52 weeks behind the scenes, this breakfast was driven by a year's worth of work by these guys, and they deserve all the credit for putting together what you're going to see today. And I think it'll be a huge first product for diversity industry. So thank you guys. Overall, huge accomplishment. And last thing I would just say is that there's a big article in the Wall Street Journal today, I don't know if you guys have seen it, about Facebook and their diversity efforts. And the article is not exactly positive, but I took away a huge positive motion from Facebook and the things that they've been trying to do in diversity. And I think one of the things that we have to get used to as a combined entity and team is that competing in the Olympics comes with a lot of training, and it comes with a lot of failed races, and you don't win all the time. But if we want to be Olympic athletes at diversity, we're going to have to basically do what we've done for the last 12 months, but even do it in a more intense way and take more risks and more chances overall. So the one thing Randy and I have always asked for out of the meetings and the breakfasts and the things that we're doing is, what can you do yourself personally to help train and try things? And then 2 is, how do we basically push ourselves to make this a massive, massive business strategy also? So just like any other business strategy, we should push ourselves all the way to failure on this endeavor. And I think today you'll see the first products. This should be the first string in many, many products for diversity overall. So we're super highly engaged in this. We have a board meeting after this meeting, and I think we are going to go out and try to raise more money and raise more leaders to get involved in this overall. And anything you want to do as an individual athlete to compete in the Diversity Olympics, we are going to cheer you on, give you a tracksuit, and Randy and I will hold the water bottles as you run around the track, and we'll run around the track with you.
And anyone who, as in the Olympics, good metaphor, as in the one race where runner fell down and another runner stopped to pick her up, that's what we're here for. Or the other race where the 2 runners joined hands to cross the finish line together, that's what we're here for. That's what we need your help for. Help pick us up, join hands with us, let us pick you up, and we can take this forward. We could actually do something. It may only be 100 students right now in 2 programs, but that 100 can become 500 very quickly, can become 1,000 very quickly. But what we need to do after we've given them this training, after we've put them through a certification test that actually will qualify them, we also have to open up jobs for people. Those jobs are there. This is the fastest growing industry in this country, in the world. The jobs are there. We just need to collect them and to connect these qualified candidates to these jobs. That's our goal for the next year and beyond. So thank you for being part of this, and on with the show. Michael?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Year and a half ago, we were here, smaller group, and one of the ideas that percolated was the idea that a lot of companies here are involved with nonprofit organizations, but no one knew which organizations people were working with. One organization might say, we want to have our folks volunteer, we don't know what's out there. And so the idea came that there should be an online directory of organizations, nonprofits that are dedicated to ideas of diversity and also technology. We want to take the argument that we hear all the time, well, you know, I'd love to hire a fill in the blank, but there's just not enough of them. We want to take that argument completely off the table. And first of all, I'll say that argument doesn't really hold any water anyway. But we want to make sure that people can no longer use that as an excuse. And it is true that introducing college students or even high school students to the opportunities in digital advertising is probably a little too late, that people need to learn about these industries and the opportunities going way back, middle school, even earlier. And so there are so many organizations out there that are dealing with kids, men and women who don't have access to the same opportunities that all of us have had. And we think it's very important that our member organizations and individuals commit themselves to working with these groups as well. It doesn't always take money. Sometimes it just takes a spirit of volunteerism. And so we were committed to developing an online directory, and today you're going to see the results. So Twyla, come on up.
Good morning. Hello, everyone. I want to start off by saying I've been with AOL for 5 years. I made 5 years this summer. And so that's about 20 all-hand meetings, town halls, and I said, wow, I never want to be the following act after Tim Armstrong. And now it's Tim, it's Michael, and Randall. Great. So I have the honor to share with you a tool that we've been working on for quite some time, Maureen and I and team at the IAB, and it's pretty amazing, and I hope that I can get you excited about what we're doing here. So what is a directory? Not a play on words, it's a directory. And it's a tool to help you really make connections with the community so that you can work with those nonprofit organizations that are really driving diversity and inclusion. The directory holds now about 500 nonprofit, growing at every day. They serve and provide services, from a range of mentoring, workforce development, just to name a few. So nearly every state is represented, heavily concentrated in New York and the Bay Area, because this is really reflective of our industry. And it's also in Canada. So like we like to say here at AOL, it's global. So how does this help you? It is your one-stop shop to find these partnerships and really help you in building your diversity talent pipeline. And in addition, it's the best way to share practices. And to give you an example, one of our initiatives here is an internship program that we call Infuse 100. Last summer it was piloted. We started with 50. You know, we don't want to start with 100 at the first time. And we really were, looking for organizations that we can partner with to really build and recruit for these students and meet our criteria. So to be strategic, we've partnered with nonprofit organizations. And now that you have a directory like this, we're looking at this year, we've increased it to 100, but next year we can broaden who we're working with and making sure that we have Infuse interns in all of our offices. And we've actually taken the Infuse program this summer global. We're in Canada and we're in the UK. So without further ado, I'd like to take you through it. I'm going to have Maureen join me on stage, and she's going to act like she hasn't seen it. Hold the mic so I can. All right. Okay. So, as I mentioned, when you come to the first page, you'll learn about the directory. 500 plus nonprofit organizations, and here are the communities that they're involved in. So Maureen, thank you. I'd love to show you this tool to help you with your diversity efforts and help you build your pipeline. Can I take you through it? Sure. All right. So you come to the home page. I want to make sure that it's clear to you that these are nonprofit organizations as you see at the top. If you go to the very top, you see that there's another search button. In the middle, there's a way for you to share this information through your Facebook or Twitter or your email, because we all know it's not real until you share it or you tweet about it and put it on your Facebook page, right? Okay, it's not real. All right, and then you have your menu, which will take you through and back to pages that I'll take you through the site, but however, there's also a fact page so you can learn everything about the directory. Okay, you scroll down for me. All right, awesome ways for you to search, so we'll get back to that in a little bit, but as you know, if we really want to pique your interest immediately, we have some featured organizations for you to take a look at. But if you just want to search by location in the United States, you can go to our map. All right? Okay, scroll down. So Maureen, you want to continue to learn more about us? You can sign up for our newsletter, receive updates, and we'll be frequently updating that. And on the right, if you know about an organization that might not be included in our 500, because this is growing, please let us know. That's you, okay. Then we have a spotlight section. Today, it's highlighting a quote from Frida, who is not I am actually before her today. She will be following me. And then there's recent news if you want to learn more about what iDiverse is doing and the Education Foundation. And if you see at the bottom, AOL provided their support in building the iDiverse directory. Thanks, AOL. All right, so let's go back to the search. Let me take you through. If you scroll to the top. Now, let's say you've heard about a nonprofit organization that you really want to work with because they're doing some fantastic things. So you know their name. We already have the location here, so we all can learn about, what's happening in our neighborhood. So let's start with Script Ed. Is Script Ed in the house today? Woo! All right. Hit go. So it takes you to a page where you learn their mission. I'll read this to you, just a little bit of this. Script Ed brings its tuition-free program directly to schools where classes are taught by software developers on a volunteer basis. Awesome, right? You want to learn more? Sure. Let's hit that details page. If you look to the right, it tells you providing tags of all the things that Script Ed does and the things that might be of strong interest to you. Do you want to get involved? Let's hit that button. So provide us with your contact information, what you're interested in, why you want to partner with them, and then get involved. All right, so now you want to go back to the front page. Let's hit that button at the top. All right. So let's say you don't know of an organization and you just want to look at a variety of topics. So let's browse by topic. right here. Okay, so as you can see, you can check by audience, the program, the ways that you want to help, and the location. As I mentioned, nearly all states are represented in the directory. So let's scroll to the top. Let's try to create a search that will give us a broad range of different organizations. Let's look at economically disadvantaged, education, and volunteering. Scroll down, and let's click on good old New York again. Right here, there we go, submit. Wow, look at that. So even 1 mile away, right outside our door, is an organization that I can partner with to really, target volunteering, economically disadvantaged folks. Pretty awesome, right, Maureen?
So far, so good.
All right. Let's hit that button and go back to the top. I have one more way I want to show you how you can search. Scroll down. Okay, so let's say you just want to search a popular topic. I'd say veterans is really important to the diversity movement right now. Verizon is doing a lot of work there. So let's hit on veterans. Again, you already had New York populated, so it's again showing you organizations that you could work with that's very close and nearby.
Nice.
Are you sold?
Are you sold? Yeah.
All right. So, Maureen, I want you to win in your organization in diversity space. I want all of us to win. So I hope that you felt that this tool was user-friendly and it's really going to help you take your diversity efforts to the next step. If you want to provide us with feedback, you can contact us at
info@idiverse.org.
Thank you.
Thank you, Twyla and her silent partner. It's a very different landscape since we were here last time. Lack of diversity is no longer just our little secret. The whole world knows about it, and the whole world is watching. It's a little curious as to why there's such a fascination with our industry. I think it's one part envy and one part fear. I'm going to say it, Schadenfreude. Now, big debate whether it's Schadenfreude or Schadenfreude, so I decided to say envy instead. The envy part is pretty obvious. I mean, we're the haves right now in a have and have not world. But the fear, the concern is a little bit more nuanced, I think. Our industry is made up of a certain number of baby boomers and Gen Xers and a lot of millennials. And we were all brought up in an era of civil rights and women's rights, equality and tolerance. And if we, the best and the brightest, if we have the problems of diversity and inclusion today, still, with all the background, with everything that we experienced growing up, if we still have these problems in our industry, well, then we have a real problem. We have a problem that really points to a problem in the soul of our society. And that's a real cause for concern. The stakes are incredibly high. And I'm speaking to the converted. You all decided to show up, and I'm very, very gratified that you did. But we need you to go back to your companies and talk to other companies and get them involved. We can't just run our businesses and let someone else take care of the problem. This is something we all have to do. Tim's metaphor about the Olympics was great. And the way to earn a medal in these Olympics is to make a pledge. And Tim's a great, he's terrific when it comes to marketing messages. And he would ask me, define the mission of the foundation, and I would tell him, and he'd say, you know, that elevator pitch is way too long. You need 300 floors. That's not going to work. And he kept hounding me to make it shorter and more direct so that anybody could get it. And we finally came up with just a few words. 200 companies, 10,000 jobs, 2020 workforce target. That's really it. And so over the next several weeks, we're going to be communicating with all of you, all of your companies, to make a pledge, to commit to hiring 10,000 people of all sorts of diverse backgrounds. And you know, the numbers that typically get released by companies, by public companies, are gender and race. But diversity obviously goes way beyond that. Veterans, as Twyla mentioned, LGBT, senior citizens, and no, I don't have a vested interest in that. The disabled, newly arrived. There's all sorts of people who are our customers, and they should be our employees as well. So I know that AOL has already made a commitment to a certain number. And here's the thing, when we ask you to make this commitment, we're not going to ask you to make that number public. I will know, the foundation will know, but what we want to do is create a goal, and we're going to let the world know the companies that have contributed to that goal, so that it starts with AOL, and in a short time I'm going to be talking to our board of directors, and we're going to get them to commit, and then we're going to come out with more companies, and then we're going to ask all of you to commit as well, so that by advertising week, at the end of September, we can have a big, big list of companies and make a real start towards those 10,000. What's important to remember is that who we're really talking about. You know, diversity is not just something that we do because we have to, or because the EEOC demands it, or because even because it makes us feel good. I want to read a letter to you that we received from one of the candidates who we accepted into the training program that starts in San Mateo tonight. This is a woman who is, I would say, in her mid-30s, coming out of a difficult relationship. And she wrote, "I want to thank you so very much for this fantastic gift and opportunity. I can't express in words how much this means to me. It's been a real struggle these past 8 years, and now I'm finally getting a chance to move forward and reclaim my life with educational goals and eventually finances. I am so happy. I feel as if I am Cinderella getting a chance to go to the ball. This is cause for a celebration. Again, I truly thank you with all my heart. This is why we're doing the program." Okay? So, thank you again. I'd like to bring up now Frida Kapor-Klein. Frida has been here before. She's talked at the IAB a number of times. There is probably no one who knows more about and has worked harder on achieving diversity and inclusion in tech companies. She really is an expert. She runs the Kapor Center, thank you, I knew, for social impact. She's a founder of the Level Playing Field Institute. She's really a great person. You can learn a lot from what she has to offer all of you, so please take notes. Now, Frida.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be back. I too am on vacation, having just flown in from not too far from where Tim is. and that's how important this is to us. What I want to do is do a quick overview and some framing. There are many familiar faces in the audience. This is not the same presentation you've seen before, so we're always switching it up, hopefully keep you engaged. Are we going to have time for questions afterwards? Yeah, okay, great. So I'm going to run through this, but if you've got questions, disagreements, new data, I'm here. So some of you remember this young man, right? This is Mohammed, who was taken out of his school in Texas in handcuffs because he was building a radio. That got him thrown out of school and a visit with Obama. When you look at him soldering his equipment, you have a gut reaction. Some people see him as a terrorist, some people see him as a genius. That backdrop is the water we all swim in, and what we need to be constantly confronting whenever we're talking about diversity and inclusion in tech. Anybody know who these women are? Wild guess? UN agency on something or another. Global, we heard global, right? Global Mothers Against Drunk Driving. What images come to mind? How about that one? Those are internationally renowned scientists in these fields. Not the first thing we thought of. There are actually 2 computer scientists and 1 computational biologist there. These are rock star engineers, and not clear that if any of them walked into your office, you would recognize them as great candidates. So what are we going to talk about? The current landscape in tech. We're going to talk about the pipeline, capital S, pipelines problem. And I was so glad that Tim mentioned that article in the Wall Street Journal. I think we'll talk about how Facebook is framing the issue and also how Facebook is, I personally feel, being a bit maligned, but what we can learn from their lesson. We're also going to talk really briefly about how hidden bias operates. Our approach at Level Playing Field Institute, as Michael mentioned, and Capeware Center for Social Impact, and Capeware Capital, where we invest in seed stage tech companies with social impact. And then I was also asked just to mention Project Include. How many of you read about the launch of Project Include a few months ago? So I'm one of the 8 founding team members and can tell you what we're up to there. On the current landscape, what you may be able to see here is that middle pair of bars. 2 years ago now, the 2014-2015 academic school year, the US became majority kids of color across the US. We're not just talking about a city here or there, a state here or there. National numbers, who's in K-12 education? Kids of color. If you look at the pair of bars on the right, that is the gap with kids of color quickly outpacing white kids. That is your employee base, that is your customer base. There's no better practical reason to be paying attention to diversity right now. In contrast, here's what Silicon Valley's numbers look like, the aggregate of the companies that have been releasing their data over the last couple of years. You've seen this, 2/3 men, with Caucasians being far overrepresented, some Asian groups being overrepresented, some being underrepresented, and African Americans and Latinx being woefully underrepresented. So we've been hearing about this pipeline problem, and that's what Facebook talked about. Not their problem, public education system's broken, that's why they're giving $15 million to code.org to go fix something. We think there is a pipeline problem, and we also think there's a leaky pipeline problem. That framing that it's either or is problematic. We see biases and barriers all across the pipeline that begin in early education. I know you can't read all of that, but we've got pre-K-12 education. When a teacher says to a kid, and I'll be talking in a minute about our SMASH Academy, our Summer Math and Science Honors Academy. We've been running it for 13 years. I was sitting with a group of kids in session a few weeks ago. Every single kid at the lunch table these are all low-income kids of color, half girls. Every single kid at the lunch table had the experience of a teacher saying to them, drop that AP course. 3 AP courses, that's too much. Why are you doing this as a sophomore? Why don't you wait till you're a senior? All kinds of messages, you can't do this, you shouldn't do this, it's too hard. That's part of the leaky pipeline, where all this talent is being pushed out. And you see it in post-secondary education, when you go all the way through college and never see a professor that looks like you. Then we see it in every access point, sourcing, interview questions, coding interviews, name any point along the way. It's riddled with bias that chases talent out the door. And then once we get in those companies, look at the retention numbers. Intel, that gets a lot of credit for going out there, transparency, huge $300 million commitment. They have been, in the last couple of reports, including one a couple of weeks ago, their retention numbers for African American are terrible. That's an inclusion and a culture issue. This is not easy stuff, and it's not just one point. It is the entire pipeline needs to be fixed, and we need to make sure that we plug all the leaks and that we hand talent safely from point to point. For those who are looking at business reasons, besides those of your employees and your customers, McKinsey did a study last year looking at what happens to companies that have diversity in their senior leadership and board. If your company has gender diversity in its leadership and board, you have a 15% financial outperformance of others in your industry with less gender diversity. That more than doubles when you get to racial and ethnic diversity in senior leadership and your board. So if somebody is looking at, and it goes to 35% financial outperformance relative to others in your sector. So if somebody's looking for a business reason, that's a pretty good one. So how does this operate? And I'm not going to go through, I will presume by now you've all seen, read, heard, probably dozens of resume studies about just changing the names from Greg and Emily to Lakeisha and Jamal, and who gets the jobs and who gets the callbacks. Study after study after study. We're also looking at it in the world of startups. So what we see is that identical pitch decks narrated by either a male or a female voice, were sent to investors. These were business plans for companies that had already won pitch competitions, so we knew that they were investable ideas. 68% of the judges who saw the same pitch deck and heard it narrated by a male voice invested. 32% of those who saw the identical pitch deck and heard the identical script, but it was spoken by a female voice. So more than twice as likely. So when we talk about objective criteria, we only fund the best and the brightest. We don't care who you are. We only want the best ideas. The data don't support it. And let's remind ourselves that that was the same whether you were a male judge or a female judge. It is the bias in the culture that all of us carry. Very interesting study on intersectionality, and I think we don't talk about intersectionality. All of us have multiple descriptors and demographics. When we talk about gender, we don't often enough talk about, are the experiences of women the same? Are they when it's African American women, when it's Latinas, when it's Asian American, when it's Caucasian? Often very different experiences. This study was done about the experiences just amongst women who were scientists or engineers in some kind of STEM field, and their experience of being assumed to be administrative staff or janitorial staff. And what you see is that that experience is not evenly distributed. That if you are an African American woman, if you are Latina, you are twice as likely, at least, to be assumed to be in an administrative capacity or a janitorial capacity relative to your Asian and Caucasian counterparts. Some people say, oh, what's the big deal? You know, that's just ignorance. It is ignorance, and it has a cumulative effect. Level Playing Field did a study across all kinds of corporations 10 years ago. We're repeating it this year just in tech. We started with 19,000 professionals and managers, looked at who left corporate America and why, and we looked at those specifically who left due to some form of perceived unfairness. It turns out that 13% of those who walked out the door had had that experience, cumulatively, of mistaken identity, of not being assumed to be who they were, to be able to contribute what they could contribute. So if you're worried about your retention numbers, as Intel is, as everybody should be, think about what's going on in the hallways, what's going on in the day-to-day observations and interactions of your employees. From that corporate leaver study, 3.5 times more likely are people of color to leave corporations voluntarily solely due to perceived unfairness. In addition to the mistaken identity, one of the ones that tops the list is being sent to every possible recruiting fair, community event, job fair, representing the company, while their majority counterparts are back home getting mentored, getting plum assignments, and then when it comes time for promotion, they're passed over because they haven't put enough time on the projects. If you're doing diversity work at your company, it ought to be valued and compensated as a full-time real job, not as the second or third voluntary job that you are doing. Right now, as I mentioned before, tech is looking at diversity as an either-or problem. It's either a pipeline problem, and once Facebook, Maxine Williams, came out and made that statement, and she believes she was unfairly quoted by the Wall Street Journal. She wasn't just saying it was a pipeline problem, but that is the way it was spun. There was an immediate and I think vicious response. I'm not excusing Facebook or their numbers. They can and should do better. But I think there was a very vicious attack on Twitter with a hashtag FBNoExcuses going after Maxine. And I wonder if they would have gone after a white woman with that level of anger. So I think there's an alternative, which is to see that you've got both the tech culture and the pipeline as sharing this culture of bias, and it explains the problem we face today. There is no simple solution. It's not writing a check to fix public education, and it's not doing better on the recruiting end. It is a much more comprehensive approach. I want to tell you a little bit about what we're doing in our family of organizations based in Oakland, California, to look at these issues. Here's our core belief, that genius is evenly distributed by zip code, but opportunity is not. If you believe that, then you organize your activities to act on that. So we're looking in many places about how we're approaching disparities in the tech ecosystem. So I mentioned our SMASH program, our Summer Math and Science Honors Academy. I'll tell you a little more. We just finished our 13th summer on 5 campuses. We're expanding. For those who are New York-based, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, whose district is Brooklyn, reached out to us a few months ago and said, we want a SMASH Academy in his district. So anybody who's interested in bringing SMASH to the New York area, come see me. We are also doing a lot of original research and also going to be funding hidden bias research as it impacts tech hiring and inclusion. We are also doing a lot of community engagement work. On our philanthropic side, we were amongst the first funders of groups like Black Girls Code, Brothers Code, Hidden Genius Project, many of those groups to get them launched. And then on the investment side, as I mentioned, investing through K4 Capital in social impact tech companies. I'll tell you about a few of those. This is a little bit about our SMASH program. We take low-income kids. The majority are eligible for free and reduced lunch. They're the overwhelming majority first in family to go to college. And we take them for 5 weeks each of 3 summers of high school. And they live in the dorms on a college campus studying STEM in a context of social and racial justice. They're also taught social skills. They're also taught public speaking skills. And I'll tell you a little bit. You can see some of them. Right now, this past summer, we had 246 scholars. We have 500, that number goes up actually, we have 500 SMASH alumni who are in colleges now, if you're looking for interns. I think that's Harrison Harvey on the left, who's a high school junior, and he spoke at an event in California. Congresswoman Barbara Lee from our district happened to be there. She invited him to go address the Congressional Black Caucus last year in DC. So we flew Harrison and his mom to do that. So here are our data. 79% of the kids are eligible for free and reduced lunch, 76% first generation college bound, slightly more girls than boys, and we've been 50-50 over the 13 years. And here's our African American, Latinx, Southeast Asian, again, whoever is underrepresented in tech. And we will look differently as we go to different geographies. Morehouse was our first campus outside of California. These are 3 companies that are in the K4 Capital portfolio. And let me just tell you really briefly, if for any of you any of you heard of these companies, read about them? Really, really, really quickly. LendUp is disrupting payday lending, where you're rebuilding your credit score, building a FICO score, graduating. Every time you make a payment on time, your interest rate goes down. Take a financial literacy course, your interest rate goes down. It is to get people out of the spiral of payday lending. There is no shortage of great for-profit businesses that close gaps of access, opportunity, or outcome for low-income communities of color. We have about 120 in our portfolio now. Pigeonly, that's Frederick, who was the best marijuana logistics guy in his neighborhood. He didn't live in Colorado or Washington, so he did a little detour to federal prison. And in there, he learned a bunch of things, and he came out and started a wonderful business focused on radically reducing the cost of phone calls to and from prison. They're still $3 and $4 a minute. It is a racket, and prisons are very far removed from cities and from public transit and from ways that families can stay in touch with the incarcerated. So he's got a whole series of products in addition to phone calls, getting photos in the form factor. You can just send them from your phone, and he'll get them into the form that is accepted in each of the prisons, which differs by jurisdiction, so you can stay in touch with your loved ones. He's building a huge database of the currently, which will be the formerly incarcerated, to move into jobs for them. Pre-K-12 Plaza is based here in New York. She's got offices at the UN Incubator and upstate in Albany. She is building a multilingual platform, 25 languages, for Title I schools so that parents and kids and teachers can toggle back and forth between the native language and English and get involved in kids' education. The educational outcomes are staggering. She's in more than 300 public schools here in New York City. She's expanded to Los Angeles. She's growing incredibly rapidly, has more than 60 employees, She actually hit her 2016 numbers in March. Speaking as an investor, we love that. Speaking as an impact investor, that means that many more kids are closing that achievement gap. English language learners are the lowest performing students across the US, and she's fixing that problem as an immigrant from the Dominican Republic herself. This is what our portfolio looks like. About 60% of our companies have a founding team member who is an underrepresented person of color or a woman from any background. We blow anybody's numbers away, and we are not trading off any financial returns. We had 50 engineers come speak to our SMASH Scholars in Northern California. 50 engineers of color from our portfolio companies come speak to our SMASH kids this summer. We've pioneered, in honor of Frederick, a new sector, POT, but this is a different kind of POT. This is People Ops Technology. We held the first ever POT competition last year. Companies that are mitigating bias using technology to fix tech companies. Taking the biased language out of job descriptions. Creating, how many of you have heard that study where orchestra started screening people behind the screen and the demographics changed? We have a company that's done that for coding interviews. It's called interviewing.io. Here are a few that are in our portfolio. Make schools an alternative to a top-tier computer science degree. No money up front. These are some of our others. Jopwell, based here in New York City, diversity recruiting platform. You may have heard about it. 2 African-American co-founders out of Goldman. Unitive, which has a whole suite of enterprise products, starting with taking the biased language out of job descriptions, but moving into analyzing biased language in performance reviews, all kinds of things. Interviewing.io, the one I just mentioned. They also added voice masking. You don't know anything based on voice about gender or other things you could assume about who the interviewer is or the interviewee. WePal does video structured interviews. All the data suggests structured interviews are the least biased way to do interviews. Glassbreakers, which I understand AOL is doing a, yes? Great, Twyla. Glassbreakers is in our portfolio. They are an enterprise software solution for employee resource groups connecting with each other, connecting across offices. If you've got more than 10,000 employees, you've got multiple offices, and you've got people in ERGs within your company who've never met each other. And it's a way for them to coordinate their efforts. ProSky is a way that you can do performance-based hiring. You can give people projects and hire based on competency, not based on what school they went to. We're the first venture capital firm to put out a founder's commitment. At January 2016, any company we fund, January 2016 forward, as a condition of investment, we'll have to sign a pledge for diversity and inclusion. We offered to our companies already in our portfolio, if you would like to, we're never going to retroactively impose anything. 80 companies said we're in. You can see who they are up here and on the Capeware Capital website. We ask 4 things. We ask that they set their goals. We don't set them for them. We say, figure out who your customers are. If your customers are kids in Title I schools, then it's in your business interest that your employee base look like your customers. And so each company sets their own goals based on their business. So we've got a little acronym there of give. The second is invest. Invest in whatever tools or resources make sense for your business. And again, they're lean startups, so there's not a lot of investment dollars there. But as they grow, we'll certainly get them connected to your efforts here. The V is volunteer. Go be a role model for kids who've never seen an engineer or a CEO who looks like you. I can't overestimate the importance of that. There is no way to overestimate being a teenager, seeing somebody who looks like them, who grew up in their neighborhood, who's now running a startup. And educate yourself and your employees. Those are the 4 things we ask of our founders to do. So here, we walk the talk. Half of our partners are African American, 2/3 of our investment team. There are only 2 white people, and I'm one of them at Capor Capital. And we're going to retire soon. 2/3 of our investment team are African American or Latinx, which on the West Coast is the preferred term, a non-gendered Latina, Latino. And over half of our investments, as I mentioned, have someone who's considered underrepresented in tech. Those are some of my colleagues. Brian Dixon on the left is a partner. Jorge is an analyst. Carolina is a principal. Mandela is our portfolio services director. Anthony is an associate. I was asked to just briefly tell you about Project Include. And the tagline is give everyone a chance to succeed in tech. 8 of us came together as a voluntary effort. You see and recognize some familiar people. Erica Joy Baker is quite out there on Twitter and on Medium. She's an engineer at Slack. Bethany was an engineer at Facebook, has her own startup. Tracy Chow just left Pinterest, and she's been doing a lot of things encouraging transparency about salaries, about all kinds of things. Laura Gomez was an engineer at Twitter, has left to start her own company, Atypica, which we invested in. Yvonne has her own Ready Set consulting firm on diversity. That's me. Ellen Powell, who's an engineer by training and is probably best known for suing Kleiner Perkins, is the one who deserves credit for bringing us all together. And Susan Wu is an investor actually now based in Australia. So what we've done, most of the group are engineers. And between us, we have 150 years of tech experience. We open sourced 87 recommendations on diversity and inclusion. Take them, use them, improve them. They're there for the big common goals. Every category up there could be improved by tech-based solutions. The bullet points on the right, defining culture, implementing culture, employee life cycle, training, resolving conflicts, measuring progress, and leading SVCs are the chapters. It's projectinclude.org. You can take a look. We have 3 basic core beliefs at Project Include. Inclusive. We believe in all groups. We believe in intersectionality. And one of the things that's been most sobering is the number of groups who reach out to us and say, we're doing the same thing. We're focused on getting women on boards of directors. You look at their staff, they're all white women. And we say, no, we're not focused on the same thing. Sorry. If you're interested in intersectionality, come talk to us. If you're not, we got plenty of folks that do want to talk to us. Comprehensive. This is not a write a check or put a program in over here. This is a comprehensive solution, and accountability and metrics. So I want to just leave you with a few steps to think about on mitigating bias and building empathy, which I think is key to what we're doing here. So we're asking you to examine every single step along the pipeline into and through your company. We are not going to move the numbers as an industry until every single leak in the pipeline is plugged. So support those pipeline organizations. And the directory that you just saw is a hugely important tool in helping to do that. Everybody know the Rooney Rule? Yes? Which basically says you don't get to diversity unless every candidate pool is diverse. I don't care how important that job is, don't start your interviews until the pool is diverse. If the candidate pool isn't diverse, you'll never get to diversity. I think one of the best ways to build empathy is to put yourself in the experience of being underrepresented or an only, if that is not part of your lived experience already. Join a board where you're the only on that nonprofit board. See what it's like to be underrepresented. See what it's like to sit and listen when you're not familiar with the dominant culture. And then finally, we're from California, we want everyone to invest in pot.
we have time for a couple questions. Any questions for Frida?
Over here. Hello.
Go ahead, Stephen.
Hi. I want to thank you for raising the coder, not custodian point, because I think that is. I mean, I think it's something personal to a lot of people in the industry, right? So I work here. I started working here in the building about a year ago. Was here late one night, went out and got dinner, and came back with my food to eat at my desk, and was approached by somebody who said, "Oh, hey, I want to change the credit card for the payment. Can I do that with you?" And you know, this has happened many times before, right? Where I've been mistaken for the Chinese delivery guy, right? And then I was like, no, sorry, wrong person. And I just kind of went in, and then I came up to the office, and I saw that person. And there's a moment, right, of, wow, I'm 46 years old. I closed $30 million deals, and I'm still seen as somebody within my peer set, within my colleagues, as somebody who is the delivery guy. And I mention this because it happens to many of us, and the statistics show that, yet I don't think we talk about that enough. Because when I try to put myself in the shoes of people who are not in this minority set, and I try to think about, wow, that never happens to him. Like, he is never, ever mistaken for the custodian or the delivery guy or the housekeeper. And I realized that telling that story and sharing those experiences with as many people as possible is vital for us to for people to understand in the minority what it is, what the daily drag is, right? Because it pretty much is like trying to do your regular job driving with the parking brake on, right? Because you're always reminded that you are seen differently to the extent that somebody mistakes you for somebody who's in a completely different role, class, right, than what you have achieved. And so thank you for raising that, because that's something that I think many of us have experienced, but I think it's something that is very easy to spotlight and very powerful from the standpoint of, if you tell people you think that somebody didn't get a promotion because of their background, that's very easy to argue. Oh, well, you know, there's a lot of other factors. The fact that I was mistaken for the food delivery guy is unmistakable why that happened, right? And so, again, I want to thank you for raising that.
You're welcome. Thank you for your comment. And it's really important that we create safe spaces, and I hope it's through ERGs and other mechanisms, to create safe spaces for these stories to come out. Because everybody who hears that story learns something, thinks about, oh, would I have been that person? Have I thought that? Let me also make a very quick comment, which is there is nothing wrong with being an administrative person or a custodial or janitorial person or a food delivery person. All of those jobs deserve respect and dignity. But if you are one of the kids from our SMASH family, if you've spent part of your life homeless, living with your family in a car, and you have sacrificed everything, and every day for many of these kids is a choice between buying lunch or taking the bus, because there's not money for both. So am I hungry today and get home quicker, or do I eat today and take a long walk home? That is daily life. If you've gone through all of those hurdles and you get hired here or anywhere, and then somebody says, oh, I noticed there was a spill on the floor down there. After all of that, it's really amazing. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Carol Watson, and thank you for what you're doing and the work that's happening. I wanted to bring attention to a potential bias around only paying attention to underrepresented groups. After 10 years of doing experienced hire, diverse talent recruiting, and now at diversity best practices, one of the research that I saw recently was around the percentage of college graduates in computer science that were being directed to IT, that are not even being thought of in a lot of these roles. And so many of the people in this room come from very exceptional backgrounds that are, we're not paying attention to people that already have a lot of experience and have great backgrounds. So as we're looking for talent, making sure that we're paying attention to those that are already college graduates, already in the industry, and don't assume the bias that they may be underrepresented and underprivileged backgrounds. Also, there was some research around pipelining, and they were saying that you need more than one person of color, another person, two women that are women, otherwise they will not get hired. So when we're thinking about diverse pipeline and the Rooney Rule, it's important that we have more than one, or else that person won't be hired. So I just wanted to share those two pieces.
Thank you. The research also indicates that, if you've got 8 engineering teams, let's say, and you've got 8 fill in the blank, some underrepresented, you've got 8 African American, 8 Latinx, 8 women engineers, you would think about, oh great, I'll put 1 per team. All 8 are going to leave. What you want to do is put 2 on, at a minimum, on each of 4 teams, and leave 4 teams undiverse. Because all of the pressure, stereotype threat, imposter syndrome, all of it kicks in much more strongly when you're an only. So very important on our way to being diverse that we not put people in situations of being an only. Other?
Hi, Singleton Beato from the 4As. My question is, what can you point us to, or what tools or support can we look to for retention? We have at the 4As a lot of amazing programs to pipeline diverse talent into our industry, to train and develop those folks. And we just had 134 amazing college students come through our MATE program and be hired. We've got a 90% conversion rate. I got over 100 kids that come every summer. But the key really is, how do we retain them? And so I know that you have access to a lot of intelligence and tools and information. So what are some things that we can look to keep these multicultural folks after we hire them?
Well, that's the I part of D&I. Inclusion means focusing on changing the culture. I think it's really important that we not look at the model of getting underrepresented people trained to fit in, that we need companies that are transformed to be truly inclusive. So that means examining every part of your culture. How likely is it that someone is going to be like the gentleman who spoke up, that somebody in the halls of your company who's walking with food, if that person is Chinese or fill in any other race or gender, how likely is that person to be mistaken for somebody else? The more we can do to make sure that the underrepresented talent in our companies is championed, is visible, to remind people this is the talent that we're looking for, it's already here. But unless you focus on culture, and it's one of the things in our 87 recommendations at Project Include, if all you do is focus on getting people in the door, you're going to have a revolving door, and very soon you're going to have a reputation that that's not a hospitable place, and you're going to have an even harder time getting people in the door. So you've got to make sure that hiring managers not just de-bias the interview, but de-bias their team and create a safe place for people to speak up about their experiences.
Thank you, Frida. I want to move on if we have any time after our next speaker. Thank you. And that was Singleton, thank you for the question. It was a perfect segue to our next speaker and our next topic. When we were planning, talking about programs that the foundation wanted to do, one of the things we knew we wanted to do was to work with companies to help them with some of the issues like retention. And I had asked Frida if she would help us figure out a way to figure out what the problems were within companies. And she spoke as only Frida can speak, as though she's talking to an idiot, and said, Michael, we all know the problems, okay? We know the problems, and the tools are out there. The problem is getting companies to implement those tools and to take a real look at themselves and figure out what is it within themselves that makes it so difficult to make progress in this issue. And I asked, well, who would you suggest that I work with on that? And she told me to contact Karen Wattai, who is our next speaker. Karen is an expert in organizational behavior and change and leadership and diversity. And I'm very pleased that the foundation is retained her services to work with your companies in creating a number of task forces to really make a dent. I mean, we have this wonderful 10,000 person goal, but we can't do it if people don't stay within companies. And as Frida said, it's not up to the individual. It should not be that individuals have to change to work within the company. Companies need to make some changes as well. So Karen, come on up.
So thank you, Michael. It's a real pleasure to be here. In my work, I'm all about making change, and I know how hard it is. I'm a realist. I think you all know the same. And what I'm really excited about is that these initiatives involve all of us working together to make it happen. So we know the problem, and we have the tools. Frida talked about 87 recommendations on the project include website. All of you have copies of the Harvard Business Review article that outlines the diversity efforts that research shows makes an impact. We know the problem, we have the tools. It's now about making it happen. And the initiatives we've designed are designed to leverage the power of the industry so that we can all work together to turn companies' diversity plans into reality. So the two initiatives I'm focusing on are, first of all, the iDiverse task force, and secondly, on a series of open workshops. So the task force has two charges. The first charge is to identify and create diversity and inclusion best practices for the industry. What we're hoping to do is to create a safe and an open environment where task force members can come together to learn from experts, to share their experiences and their challenges and their successes, to brainstorm together, to come up with solutions and best practices. We are also charging the task force with being an advisory panel for the IAB Education Foundation's iDiverse initiatives and for the board itself, to share your ideas and your perspectives on the overall effort. We will be forming cohorts based on company size in order to maximize peer learning. We'll be having company membership with designated representatives to participate in task force events, and we will be holding quarterly meetings. The quarterly meetings will each focus on a theme, and it's a theme based on the needs and interests of the task force members. We'll have facilitated discussion. As lead facilitator, I see my role very much as creating an experience which is well worth your time, from which you leave with ideas and information and an action plan for things that you want to implement. We'll be spending part of our meetings on sharing information and insights and case studies, and we'll have another part of our meetings where we have real facilitated discussion, real conversation of the type Frida was mentioning, a conversation about what's working and what's not, about challenges so that we can brainstorm solutions, which we can then share with the industry in the form of best practices, and best practices that are replicable, they're scalable, they're shareable, so we can move the industry forward together. Before our first meeting, I will be meeting and talking with task force members to understand your experiences, your successes, your challenges, and how the task force and the IAB Education Foundation can best support you in your efforts. We'll be having interim calls. So between these quarterly meetings, we'll be talking with our task force members to check in on progress, to offer support, to answer questions, all so that we can build these best practices and share them with the membership in periodic reports. A few thoughts on task force membership. We have a few asks. We're asking our task force member companies to designate representatives, preferably with knowledge of your diversity and inclusion efforts, and people who have the authority and decision-making power to make it happen in your organizations. And we're asking for full participation in all task force events. The benefits of membership. First of all, to meet and learn from like-minded and committed peer companies, to be able to take part in programs that are exclusive to task force members, to learn from diversity and inclusion experts and the IAB Education Foundation, and to be recognized as a member of the iDiverse task force. So we're hoping you all join us. There's more information if you email taskforce@idiverse.org. I also mentioned workshops. These will be workshops open to all members, and they will be designed to help you move forward diversity and inclusion within your organization. So our focus will be on the how-to at an organizational level, and we'll leverage what we learn from the task force to decide on which topics to cover. So we've brainstormed, we've already talked about a number of possibilities, and let me share with you some of our ideas. First of all, to talk about how to conduct a D&I self-assessment for your companies so that you can target your efforts, your resources, your energy on the things that will matter the most and make the most difference. We've talked about a workshop on how to change corporate culture, so difficult and so necessary. We've talked about a workshop on how to create a truly effective mentoring and sponsorship program, something that research shows makes a material difference. And we've talked about learning from other industries, about bringing in people from companies and other industries who have experienced successful diversity and inclusion efforts to learn how to do that. So, in concluding, we know the problem. We have the tools. So please join us and let's work together to make it happen. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Karen or more questions for Frida? We have a couple of minutes if anybody has any questions. Yes, Randall.
So many of the companies that we work with, especially on the West Coast, have put a very, very high premium on hiring from top 5 or top 10 schools. We, in this initiative and other like initiatives, are really looking at capturing a diverse constituencies, not all of whom get to go to Harvard or Stanford or Caltech. Where have you seen successes in persuading companies to look beyond the narrow pipeline, especially of top schools, to be able to focus on the human beings and the candidates and their qualifications? Because that is about changing culture to create a better pipeline. But I know there's an issue there, and I don't know what best practice companies have done about it.
Well, lots of companies are experimenting with many things. I had an off-the-record chat with the Wall Street Journal reporter, Deepa, who wrote the piece on Facebook, this one, and the one a couple weeks ago. I spent about 30 minutes on the phone with her yesterday, and we were covering this very issue. And I said, Silicon Valley companies are great at pattern recognition of proxies and privilege. Proxies means you see Stanford on the resume and you assume it connotes a certain set of skills. but you're not really measuring for the skills. You'll take the proxy. So what we have to do is disaggregate the proxy from the competencies or the skills. Many companies, including some in our portfolio, have started using tech tools again to mask the name of the applicant and the school name. And again, if you're hiring coders, programmers, software developers, if you are starting with an interviewing.io masked interactive coding interview, you first know, can this person, because so far I don't think we've got other species learning to code, but I don't know, but all you know is it's a person. Can this person code? How did they do on your coding test? It's only after they've passed your coding test with flying colors that you find out they never went to school at all, or they graduated from an HBCU, or they learned to code in the military and they're a 40-year-old veteran. None of that is relevant if you've got a severe engineering shortage and you've just found somebody who aced your coding test. So helping companies look at how do I find the competencies and the skills. The other thing I would say, which is completely fascinating and why I love this hidden bias research, there's a company also in our portfolio called Piazza. Anybody know of Piazza? Used it? More than 1 million students have used Piazza, which is a free tool set up by college professors in courses with problem sets. So computer science, engineering, math, and it is to create an online study group, basically. And again, it was just like many of our companies, it was started by a woman who went to IIT, Indian Institute of Technology, one of the only girls, and none of the boys would study with her. So this lived experience has powered so many entrepreneurs. But she now has data on more than 1 million students who've taken mostly CS classes, and she's published a couple of articles in the business press on the STEM confidence gap, as she's called it, and she's looked only at gender, and I've been on her case to stop looking only at gender and to look at intersectionality as she looks at gender. But one of the things she discovered is at certain schools, girls ask more questions than they answer. At certain schools, there are no gender differences between the number of questions asked and answered between boys and girls. And she's also discovered that that you can ask a question anonymously. And she's looked at the schools where girls answer questions more anonymously. So it turns out that Stanford computer science students, the darling of the Sand Hill Road Venture Capital set, has one of the highest STEM confidence gaps of all schools where these 1 million students have gone. So what does that mean when you're hiring out of Stanford computer science? What that means is you're taking young men who've learned how to program in an environment where girls don't feel comfortable asking questions directly, only anonymously, and girls don't feel as comfortable answering questions as they do asking them. So what kind of employees and teammates do you think they're going to be? So when Karen's talking about helping you do self-assessments, those are some really great questions to be asking your engineers. It is not their fault if they went to Stanford, but I would knock it way down the list because you're going to have a bunch of culture problems until Stanford CS fixes its culture problems. So when you're just looking at pedigree, think about the culture in which somebody learned. How diverse was the computer science department? Because a student who grew up learning to code with diverse colleagues is going to be a much better teammate of diverse colleagues than somebody who's never studied with somebody who looks like who you're trying to hire. So it's going deeper and deeper and deeper, layer by layer, looking at the culture, looking at the biases, looking at the assumptions of our employees.
One of the more striking articles I saw this year was another Harvard Business Review article discussing how women and other underrepresented minorities in the workplace are typically punished for exhibiting diversity valued behaviors. So, for example, managers who hire people who look like them are judged negatively unless they're white men. Female executives are judged negatively if they speak out about the importance of diversity. So in this conversation, I'm wondering what strategies you would suggest to combat those stereotypes. Personally, I think that the setting explicit, concrete goals and making those very public and holding people accountable to those goals is important. Also, as you're mentioning, the company-wide assessments, required training for all employees. But I'm wondering if you have any other thoughts on that.
The research you're citing, actually those who are punished the most are African Americans and Latinos who bring in other African Americans and Latinos are punished much more than are white women, actually. But it's a stepwise thing. And so it's important to look at all of the data. Some of the stories written about it only focus on the gender. But again, it's really important to drill down there. And I'm glad you raised that. Because this is where the commitment from the top, CEOs like Tim, make a huge difference, which is who gets recognized in the way that he recognized two diversity champions sitting at the table here with us. That's really important about who's valued and what efforts are valued. So highlighting those programs, highlighting who's doing what. The other thing I mentioned, one of my colleagues at Project Include, Erica Joy Baker, is an engineer at Slack. She's got a big engineering job. Recognizing how much of a leader she is on Twitter, in her Medium posts, on Project Include, Stuart Butterfield, the CEO, changed her job to be 80% engineering and 20% diversity. So that she doesn't have to choose about, am I going to meet my engineering goals and only start my diversity work at midnight? So to be officially recognized, because Stuart believes that a diverse and inclusive Slack is a great company, and Erica is disproportionately doing more to that end than anyone else, and she ought to be recognized and rewarded, and it ought to be part of her job. So that's an example. How do we make people's D&I contributions? How do we celebrate them? But how do we see them as core business responsibilities? So one of the things at my first job in tech, which was in the 80s, which was Lotus, my job description was to make Lotus the most progressive employer in the US. The coolest job description ever, and I've never seen it since. So there's a job description you can all write. And one of the things we did employee surveys, and every employee was asked to rate anonymously the degree to which their immediate manager, as well as the C-suite manager in their area, lived Lotus's values on a day-to-day basis. And each value was broken out separately. What did we do with those scores? We rolled them up, and it was part of how we calculated compensation. You could not be a Lotus manager and meet all your business goals, but have your people think that you didn't live the values of the company and get a maximum bonus. Impossible. It was not a nice to have. It was part of your variable compensation. You wanted to hit 100% bonus, you met your business goals, and you met your living your values goals. No shortcut, you had to do both. Think about all the ways in which your company rewards people and make sure that every D&I activity is completely integrated into that reward structure.
First of all, a great talk. While you were speaking specifically about the pipelines and where there are leaks, there was an image that came to my mind about where that runoff goes. It strikes me that many of the populations that are deprived of opportunities are further disenfranchised and overrepresented in our prison population. As we head towards prison reform, one of the things that's come to my mind is how do we address the unique challenges that that population faces, and is that a portion of the population that you've considered in striving towards diversity?
Yes, and yes, and yes, and thank you for raising that. Megan Rose Dickey, a TechCrunch reporter, wrote a piece on the other pipeline problem, talking about the school to prison pipeline, and you're absolutely right to bring it up in the pipeline conversation. So I showed you the picture of one of my partners at Capel Capital, Brian Dixon. Ben was not in the office the day that we took that photo. My other partner at Capel Capital is Ben Jealous, the former head of the NAACP, who's been a champion of criminal justice reform for many, many years. And I talked to you about Pigeonly that we invested in. That's not our only company founded by a formerly incarcerated person and or offering services for the currently or formerly incarcerated. So something I do feel completely passionately about. I know amongst business there's been a big ban the box initiative, meaning get rid of the box about have you been formerly incarcerated on the initial application. Let people make it through the interview process and figure out when and where and how that gets disclosed, whether it is or isn't relevant to the job that they are applying for. So I think it's critically important to raise those issues, so thank you.
Frida, thank you so much. That brings us to the end of our workshop today. Tim, why don't you come on up, and Tim has a few final thoughts.
Really big thank you to everybody for coming, and to Frida, especially Frida. This is multiple times you've been back helping out. We really appreciate that. And to Michael and Randy. I just want to say 3 quick bullet points, and 1 or 2 of them might be controversial, but I'm a huge believer in pushing things and trying things, as Twyla and Maureen know. One is just the 2020 goals of getting to 10,000 jobs, and I think that goal is a real goal, it's a hard goal, and a goal that takes all of us to participate in. And here are the 2 bullet points I would ask you for that are going to be more direct. We had Jack Welch come in and talk to our management team last summer, and one of the things that Jack Welch said, which I hadn't heard before but I believe in, is there's a real big difference between management and leadership. And management is when you kind of manage a process or manage something that's happened, and leadership is where you step out of management and you actually try things and do things and move the ball forward. And I just want to mention 2 things I saw in our company based on what's happened here. One is the Infuse 100 program that happened, which was started by our executive assistants at the company who felt like they wanted to see more inclusion and diversity. Came out of a lunch that we had, and essentially we just said yes. You know, we didn't have a plan for it, we didn't know what it was, we didn't know how to do it, and people like Twyla stepped in and really helped drive it forward. But I think there was a lot of credit in our team that a bunch of the managers just led. They didn't wait for anyone to figure it out for them. And I think I've been spending a lot of time on this now. There's a huge issue between management and leadership in the diversity field. There's a lot of people, I say at our own company, people wait for somebody to tell them how to move the ball forward. And how many people here manage people? Okay. So if you just said yes to people who want to test things and do things, I think we'd make a lot of progress on that. The second thing was, or third bullet point is, you know, we like to say around here the famous saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Most of the companies that we've bumped into doing this work in the last year have a diversity strategy. Like, no one's devoid of a diversity strategy. Typically what happens is the culture and execution get in the way of doing that. And I heard something also this past weekend that I thought was clairvoyant from one of the NFL coaches. And the NFL coach said, to get the world's best talent, everybody's got to be uncomfortable. And I will close today by saying that where you guys are all sitting and where I'm standing used to be the CEO office here, and these were all of our executive offices. They used to be very plush. You notice they're not very plush anymore. There's cement walls and things like that. But we wanted to change the culture of our company, so we ripped down all of the offices, and the reaction internally was, wow, this is a really big, I'm uncomfortable. I sit out at an open desk. I used to have an office, and I think diversity changes have to be done the same way. And I know inside of our own company, in the last year, a bunch of the things that Frida talked about, we've tried almost all of them, and I'd say half of them have happened and half of them haven't happened. And the half that have happened is because we have people like Maureen and Twyla who basically just take it over and do it. No, how much direction did you guys get? 0, right? They took it over and just ran it all the way through the process, and the leaders of the team believed in them, but I think you guys really drove it from start to finish. The things that haven't happened, which probably should have happened here in the last year, are because the Borg kills the process in general, and there's a little bit of holding hostage some of the programs because groups or teams want to do it. And I would just say, if you're going to be a leader involved in the IB and you're going to be a leader driving this forward, there's going to be times where it's going to be really uncomfortable, and you guys know that. We've seen it here, but I would just ask if there's one thing out of here is the 2020 goal is not going to happen unless people lead, and you got to get out of management mode into leadership mode. So can we all commit to that? Yes. So I want to thank you guys for coming today. Same thing we said at the last event. If anybody has feedback, there's an email address you can send it to, which is, I think it's info@idiverse.org. You can also email me directly if you want, tim.armstrong@teamaol.com, or email Michael or Randy at the IB overall. And take huge risks this year. We're about to have our board meeting. I can promise you we will come out with more and more risks to take to go forward. So thank you guys for spending so much time with us this morning, and we'd love any feedback or ways to improve this in the future. So be a leader. Thanks.